welcome back. And to start our second segment with a question: how to experience personal growth. I think this is something very important. For example, when it comes to our mind, talking about the personality, the personal growth, I think it has to do with the stages that we pass through, if I'm correct, because definitely it will differ from one phase or from one stage to the other, from one person to the other. It has to do with our capabilities, it differs according to the personality, because sometimes some people, when they face, for example, some challenges, they are motivated, some other people, they are not. It differs according to the personality. Sometimes skills play another role when it comes to the personality. So today we have many different questions regarding this. We have the pleasure to have with us Dr. Hani Henry. He's Associate Professor of Psychology. I hope that I'm correct.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So good morning, sir, first of all.
Good morning to you.
So let's first ask how to experience our personal growth.
All right, so I'm just going to start from where you ended. When we say personal growth, are we talking about psychological growth? We already know about physiological growth. We know that when we're young, for example, our abilities to speak keeps developing, our abilities to develop memory, skills keep developing. But a lot of people don't talk really about personal growth. And when I say personal growth, I say emotional growth. I say
maturity.
Mental growth. Absolutely, maturity. So this is not something people pay attention to much. They think that this is a natural process that does happen. Unfortunately, though, like a lot
Isn't it?
I don't think that we, as a society, or even the way people raise their children, allow for this process to be natural. So let me borrow from a famous psychologist. His name is Carl Rogers. He said, basically, we're supposed to be ourselves. He wrote a nice book called On Becoming a Person. On Becoming a Person. How we become our own persons. And he said that there are a lot of things that makes us not become our own person. And he called it the conditions of worth. So, for example, you got this constant message, not just from your parents, but even from society. I will only like you, or I will only accept you if you are 1, 2, 3. They don't really tell you, I will accept you for who you are. There's no unconditional positive regard, like he's saying. So basically, what happens is that people start to develop this ideal self that's really different from who they really are. Because they want to please people. They want to please their parents. They want to look good in front of their parents, in front of their society. But as the gap widens between who you really are and what are you presenting to people, what is the mask that you're putting in, the more anxiety, the more shame, the more guilt that people experience. And this will prevent them from really becoming themselves.
Then is it the way we are brought up? Is it the circumstances around us? Is it the environment? Is it the to be exposed to certain pressures, for instance?
Right.
If we are that available, if we are that fragile?
We are resilient. A lot of people are fighting this, but we cannot deny that the pressure is too much for even young kids, right? When you look at advertisement, they do two things, right? They make you hate yourself, the way you look, your body, this is not good, you need to lose weight. They make you also hate what you have and always want to have more and more and more. Of course, I'm not generalizing. Some advertisement has actually done good things to people. They're fun. But most of the marketing business is really about making people not satisfied with themselves. So I'm not just blaming parents for this. I mean, parents are part of the system. But the idea is like we really create some sort of a railroad track for kids. And this is where you really need to follow. The idea is at the end of this railroad track, they don't discover themselves necessarily. What they do at the end is something that what people want them to be, or what they ought to be, or what they should be. It's not really about who they really are, their substance. A lot of doctors, for example, want their kids to be doctors like them. And they said, well, I created this career, or this clinic is bringing a lot of money, you need to continue my path. And then when the kid wants to study something else, the pressure, why did you get a good score in Sanawaya? Why are you doing this? You have famous characters in TV where they were medical doctors, for example, and then they choose different career paths.
Are we basically talking about children or also talking about us? Because this is another important issue.
Yes.
This has always been the problem, you know, because all the time I'm trying to satisfy others. But at the end of the day, when I sit with myself, I believe that I ignored my own needs
Needs. You
just to
silence.
satisfy others.
Right.
And accordingly, I'm demotivated.
Right.
And this is the most critical part, to be demotivated.
Absolutely. We don't learn how to be assertive as adults also, not just as children. When we say assertive, meaning I really have some rights, some needs, and I'm going to express them. I'm going to express my emotions while not violating your rights. We actually tend to be either passive or aggressive. So we sometimes eat it up and say, well, we're not going to confront people, we're not going to challenge them. But then at the end, you see this outburst sometimes where people get from the passive to the aggressive. So basically, the treatment for this is to learn how to be assertive, is to really express your needs while not taking away the rights of people. So the idea is like, but you also don't want to take the role of the victim. You want to be an active agent. You want to develop your own
Is
agency.
this something like the emotional intelligence?
Well, emotional intelligence in the
In a
field
way
is
or
more about
another?
reading other people's emotions and able to respond to
No, I
them, but
mean,
also understanding your
yes,
own emotions.
just to apply it on myself.
Right, understanding what's cooking inside instead of acting on it. A lot of people have problems because they cannot express their emotions. They cannot really find their inner voice. So you see them acting on their feelings. So if someone, for example, is really jealous or is not really respectful to other people, you're going to see them a little bit aggressive, this kind of like abrasiveness in the way they talk to them. But if they have handled their own feelings and they own them, see, this is the thing too about personal growth. A lot of people need to own their emotions. A lot of people need to say, okay, I
Why
feel
I have
this
the
way.
impression that you are talking about the difference between behaving in a primitive society, for instance, and to be raised in a modern or a civilized, to be accurate, society. Civilization and culture here, should they play a vital role in our personal growth, or this is something genetic, or this is something which we should acquire by ourselves?
Well, I really have issue with the word primitive because I don't think we can call some societies primitive. If you're talking about societies that haven't developed yet, when you look at them, they don't have the same issues that civilized societies have. Like you don't have a rape culture, for example. You don't have exploitation of women. You see women has a lot equal rights more in certain societies, of course. So we don't want to use that word, but we're saying more about our societies really are more aware of their issues. Are they dealing with it, or are they just like scoffing it? They don't want to deal with it. I think that's the difference between one society and another. But the idea about primitive, because some societies haven't developed, but they have better values than more civilized societies. They do have community, sense of community. They don't have rugged individualism that makes a lot of people separated, isolated from each other. What we do have right now is really a soulless society, a consumeristic society. It's all about consumption, and at the end people keep consuming and consuming. They forget their interpersonal relationships, they forget intimacy, they forget to connect with each other, they forget a lot of values that get lost. People now, many people now, love things and use people. You're supposed to do the opposite. You're supposed to love people
And you
and use
things.
objects. But what happens is when you look at these lines, I'm not going to say the name
So
of the
how
phone.
can we change, I mean, how to change because this is something very important, our behavior, our culture, to experience this balance, because I believe also another challenge that we have is that being emotional.
Right.
How to be mature enough to understand, because it is important. If you are mature, you will be able to put at least your priorities.
I'm gonna respond to you with a selfish answer. I think we are underestimating the role of psychology in all of this. A lot of when I see a lot of people getting invited for shows, they always invite people who pathologize others. They look always at the deficiency. We need to be more of a growth-oriented society, which means like we shouldn't focus much on deficiency. We should focus on each person's abilities, talents. We should focus on how to allow the person to become their own self while also connecting to others. We should allow people to be maturely dependent, not dependent and not too independent. We should allow people, in education, you need to start changing people's minds by asking them to think critically about things, to ask them about being honest with themselves, developing values that will actually enhance their growth. We have to start from scratch, to be honest, but at the same time, We really have to allow people to become themselves. This is the real issue. A lot of people are not becoming themselves. We are burying talents because a lot of people feel that they have to be something that they're not really are. We have this what we call presentational self.
May I implement this on some events which took place recently in Egypt?
Okay.
For instance, by the 11th of February 2011, when Hosni Mubarak was toppled, many people were thinking that everything is going to be great since day one.
Right.
And when President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi became the president,
Right.
many people thought that he has such a magic stick. So
Right.
it's our surge of passions, it's our way of thinking about it this way emotionally,
Right.
not to think with reason or
Right.
to be rational enough.
Right.
This has something to do with our personal growth. I mean, we are not that mature.
Well, I think it has to do more with lack of critical thinking, right? There are skills that people learn when as early as 7 or 8 years old. We don't usually teach it even in college. I see a lot of college students don't even think critically. There are certain guidelines. For example, one of the guidelines of critical thinking, consider other interpretation. The two examples you give show that people are only having one interpretation of the events. They don't consider that the other interpretation can take place. You also have to examine your evidence. A lot of people don't have evidence for whatever they say. And I read this in here, I read that in here, or I know this because I know this. They don't really apply. There are tons of guidelines, but there are a few of them we can talk about. Like examine the evidence, consider other interpretation, overgeneralization. A lot of people overgeneralize. They simplify too much. We really need to help people understand this will get you into trouble. You're going to set yourself up for failure. So when you have, and to be completely honest, you see this sometimes in the media, people don't see how blatantly prejudiced they are because they haven't considered their own biases and assumptions, and they just talk. And you see a guy in YouTube having the same thing and then saying the opposite a year later because he hasn't really exposed himself to what we call critical thinking. I need to be aware of my biases. I need to monitor myself. I need to question what I'm saying instead of just being impulsive or having this knee-jerk reaction to everything. That's what we call a knee-jerk reaction. A lot of people do not contemplate, do not think. They're impulsively thinking. There's no filter to reflect on. I think it's the education of failure of our country, right? We don't
Education of failure?
Of course, we cram things into people's head. We don't ask them to think about the material. At the end, you give them this exam. You have to regurgitate everything you took.
We don't plan to fail, but we fail to plan.
Both. But I think we have to have a major overhaul in our educational system. The idea is not to accumulate information and then regurgitate in the exam and then you don't remember anything. A lot of people get graduated said they don't remember anything from college. Why? Because you haven't engaged in a critical thinking. You absorb things like a sponge, right? And creativity, and you absorb things as if you're a sponge.
Sometimes I believe this is because, I'm sorry to say this, but Egyptians do not read.
This is another serious problem.
Because I believe that one of the failures or the problems that we really face, because some of the people, they have been used in moving the people, and people do not understand. They don't have anything in mind about history, or because we have to learn history by heart. We have to understand. So if you are going to talk to me about something, I must not move just immediately after you use that, just as what happened in some of the private channels, actually, that you moved immediately because he is an Egyptian, he's a good person, but he is emotional as well. He has no background about the current situation, for example, or the history. So he was moved again by his emotions, and accordingly, automatically, people were moved with him emotionally. And this is the important part. This is what I was talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. But that's also another guideline of critical thinking. Don't let your emotional reasoning dominate. Because a lot of people reason with their emotionality. They don't see how much their emotional experiences are creating a fog in their realization and perceptions.
Whenever you're saying most people, sir, you're talking about most people, most Egyptians, or most people in the whole world?
I think it's just not just Egypt, to be completely honest. And the idea about reading, too, I mean, this is a word trend. But I think for us,
Not that word trend, I'm sorry, when it comes to reading.
well, it's just like
Just
when you look at
compare
the
if you are in
internet.
any, for example, give you just...
No, of course.
Yes.
But the internet is taking a huge bulk of people's time, and the internet is not real reading.
No,
It's
I mean,
just
for
people
example,
writing.
if you are on board in any plane, for example, or in
Right.
any other
And
place,
commute, they have a long commute.
you will
They do
find
that.
each one carrying a book in
I
his
agree.
hands,
I
even the
agree.
kids.
I agree.
And you will find Arab people in general, no.
Well, I mean,
They're playing games on the iPad, for example.
unfortunately,
Or
this is partly true, but I'm telling you also that there has been a problem with the internet because the time people, a ridiculous amount of people spend on chatting, on doing, on the billions of dollars they actually spend on games. This is very alarming. But you're right. I think the culture of reading, it's like when you actually, you don't have even easy access to books, and most of the books are really related to one or two arenas. We don't have culture book. I mean, we don't have Naguib Mahfouz anymore. We don't have a lot of novelists anymore, and the novelists are really
I
very
think
political.
there are phases here.
Right.
I mean, now we are that much, I mean, talking about the age as it's very fast. So
Yeah.
we should, even if we want to read something, it's short stories.
Right.
It's
Good
to
point.
just have a look on blogs on the internet.
Agree.
Watching even sitcoms, not long series. But let me here focus on something because you've said it among lines.
Sure.
It's the role of psychology, I'm sorry.
Let me make a difference in psychiatry. Psychiatry is
this
medical.
is the problem, that they,
Right.
they always concentrate with the psychiatrists.
Right.
And not
That's what I was
psychologists.
saying
Yes.
earlier.
Yeah.
It's like, with all respect to psychiatrists, they look at people having disorders, and there is medicine for this.
Psychic deviation, you mean?
Yeah, they really, most of them, usually, not most, okay, many of them, I should to be politically correct, they think about diagnosis and labeling.
They are
and-
doctors.
Right, medical doctors.
Yes.
Whereas we, I mean, I can speak on myself. I don't want to speak on behalf
Yeah,
of the
okay.
people. I look at the problem as more like biopsychosocial. So there's biological. I agree with that there are people with biological tendency, but psychological, social, the three coming together and creating this issue that people are dealing with. But I'm sorry, you were saying psychology, the role of psychology.
In 1 minute.
The role of psychology is just to help people become more aware about who they really are and do something about it. Achieve your full potential. There's a lot of things buried in you. Get them out. Psychology will help you become more aware. I'm going to give a lecture about that soon.
And our director is asking, can we do a very special episode on how to manage anger?
Of course. We can
Definitely.
Great. This is a promise then?
Of course. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Actually, this is something very, very important, Dr. Hani Henry. Thank you very much for joining
You're
us,
welcome.
Associate Professor of Psychology.
Thank you.
This is really something very, very important. I believe we all need it. And by the way,
I
when you were talking about reading, I need, or I want that we have to go to read our history, not
Absolutely.
something new or short novels like
Let's start with this,
read
yes.
our history, read our records, everything, and then
legacy.
yes, this is
Right.
something very, very important. At least read for Naguib Mahfouz. Why not
Yeah.
our youth to read for him? This is something important as well. But at
agree.
the end, thank you very much. I hope that we can achieve, arrange something for just anger control.
Sure.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
By this, we come to the end of this episode of The Breakfast Show. Till we meet again, same time on Live TV International. Many thanks for watching. Stay tuned here with us. Don't go anywhere. This is Nashwa Rashid, my dear colleague, and I was Namina Abdurrahman. Thank you very much.